South Hunting Podcast. This is Mike Hickman, your host, and I have a great interview for you today. We are going to be getting into scouting. I'm going to be talking to Thomas Venuti, somebody that I've admired for a long time from a hunting standpoint. I think I do a good job introducing him in the intro, so I'll save that for you when we start the interview off. But we talk about in-season scouting, preseason scouting, his tactics on public land in Florida, and how he's been able to get it done year in and year out. I've been able to actually get some scouting in myself before the season here. I got together with Brian Grossman from Georgia Field Podcast, if you listen to that one, which is really cool to finally get out in the field. I've been getting my bow out and practicing my shots with that. So the season is right around the corner, and I'm getting excited for it. I'm sure y'all are too. Quick podcast sponsor for you. Still sponsored by the Pith Purge. That's the ozone generator unit that I am selling on Amazon, and probably going to be only on Amazon for a limited amount of time, thanks to California. Apparently, California doesn't like ozone generators, since breathing straight ozone can be hazardous for your health, and they don't trust people to be smart, so they banned the sale of them in their state, which means Amazon won't list it on their platform. So it is still available on Amazon, but you have got to click the link directly. So I've got a link in the podcast notes. If you'll click that, I've got it on sale right now. I've got some I'd like to clear out of my Amazon inventory. So they're on sale right now for $69.99, which is a killer deal for an ozone generator that puts out 350 milligrams per hour of ozone. They work really good for keeping in your hunting bag or your truck. Another great use is just throw it in your closet, wherever you keep the stuff. One other quick thing before we jump into this interview is I've got an interview with Tony Peterson coming up. A lot of you know him. He's been in the hunting media for a long time. He's somebody that has been on the podcast before, and I really enjoy talking to him. I don't even have a topic set up for him yet, but I know he's a great guy to talk to, so that's going to be coming up. If you have any questions or topics you think I should cover with Tony, just reach out to me you can email me at downsouthhunt@gmail.com. You can send me a DM on Facebook or Instagram. That's at downsouthhunt. All right, let's go ahead and get into this interview. It's a longer one, but I know you're going to like it. All right, I'm really excited to have Thomas Venuti on a call with me right now. Thomas is somebody that when I launched the podcast, I can't even remember when we started, probably back in like 2018. He was one of the first people that I messaged to see if we could try to get together. And sometimes schedules don't line up and that kind of stuff right away, but I'm excited that he's finally on with us. He's somebody that I've seen he's had a ton of success hunting on public land in Florida. I know he hunts in private too, but just really all over the state. Just gets it done year after year. So I think we have a lot that we can learn from him. Welcome to the show, Thomas.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. How you been? How's your summer going so far?
Extremely busy. We're trying to have a house built. I've got a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and obviously work. So between all that, I've managed to make it out to the woods a couple times, but it's mostly playing daddy and trying to get our house built.
Yeah, man. Once you get into the world of having kids, it's definitely less time for hunting, and then of course you get into the world of home ownership as well. Those are definitely time sucks.
Absolutely.
Well, if you could just kind of give us like a rundown of how you got into hunting, how long you've been hunting. Have you always been serious about it? What's your background with that?
So my dad got me into hunting when I was really young. I can't remember, how old I was when he first took me with him. I think I was probably, I don't know, I'd say about 6 years old. But by the time I was 8 or 9, he had me actually sitting in a stand by myself with my bow. So, and that was kind of a thing with him, is he wanted me to learn how to archery hunt first. So I started archery hunting when I believe I was 8. I think I turned 9 that season. And I didn't end up killing my first deer till I was about, I think, 13. I missed plenty, which, at that young of age is it's trial and error, obviously, but I killed my first deer with my bow when I was 13 on a management area. And after that, it kind of clicked, and I started having more success from there. But I'm 34 now. I'll be 35 this year, so whatever that math equals up to. But ever since my dad got me into it, I've been pretty hardcore with it every year. I mean, during high school, I was kind of hit or miss, between girlfriends, and I played football and basketball and stuff like that. But any opportunity that I had free time, I'd go with my dad.
What kind of bow do you start with when you're 8, 9 years old?
I started with a PSE Spirit. It was all I remember about. I mean, I can see it in my mind. It was an old cable teardrop style bow, very little let off, and he'd crank me. Yeah, I think at 8 I was able to pull 35 pounds, which was the legal minimum at that time. I was a pretty big kid, actually. I stopped growing when I was like 12 years old. I was like 6'2" when I was 12. But, it was a PSE Spirit. And it wasn't the easiest thing in the world to shoot, which probably, led to me missing a few deer. But at least I was out there, and I was ate up with it.
Yeah. Was there a point where you felt like you kind of passed your dad up in like a passion for hunting, or are you guys still on this? Obviously I see you on, I saw you on the Florida Sportsman Forum a lot and Facebook and that kind of stuff, but maybe he's as ate up as you and just doesn't post about it. But was there a point where you like passed him up in your passion for it?
I wouldn't say that I've passed him. I would just say that, I think we're pretty equal with it. He's, for the most part, all he does is think about it 24/7, kind of like I do. It's just, as he gets older, he's slowing down a little bit. I remember when I was in the woods, when I was a kid with him, I'm following behind him, and he's always turning around and shushing me, or pick up your feet, you're walking too loud, all this other stuff. Not like he was trying to give me a hard time, but those were just, lessons he was trying to teach me. Hey, these are things that you need to do. It's all part of being successful, So now it's kind of funny. I joke with him. I'm walking in front nowadays when we go scouting together, and I'm like, hey man, pick your damn feet up, just to mess with him, So, but yeah, he's getting older. He still has that passion and drive. He just can't do what he could do 20 years ago.
Yeah. One thing that stands out to me about you is just the number of bucks that you, and I honestly haven't seen what you've done the last couple of years. So I guess maybe that's a real good place to start. How did your season go last year? What did that look like?
Last year, I ended up with, obviously, you moved to Georgia, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
You're out of Florida. Yep. So, but I'm sure you're still aware of the 5 season limit. You can only kill 5 deer. So
yes.
I ended up with 4 bucks. I shot an 8-point during archery, and 3 different bucks during general gun, a 9-point and 2 other 8 points.
And are you, the way you approach a season, is it basically you're hunting whatever's legal during that season, or whatever a particular quota hunt is open for?
Yeah. I try to, I've got some local mainstays I try to hunt. If it works out, it works out. If not, but obviously there's a few other, there's a few more sought after places throughout the state that I randomly try to get into, try to save points and whatnot. But if I can't get those, I either try to get some of the locals if I have a lesser amount of points in that category, or try to get something on the redraw. But whatever's open and legal at the time, me and my wife are trying to go after. We kind of, a while back, we kind of try to set a goal as far as, I don't think we'll ever reach it, but, kill as many deer as we can on as many different WMAs in Florida as we can. Obviously now, since we have kids and stuff, it kind of makes that a little more difficult, but, we'll travel. We get a permit somewhere, and I think the place is, worth our time. We've gone to the Panhandle. We've yet to go to South Florida, but we do have a permit for a place that's, I would consider, it's still Zone C, but it's pretty far south, further south than I've ever been as far as hunting wise. So if I think it's worth it, I'll go. I'll travel.
Yeah, that South Florida thing is like a whole different animal. It's definitely something I'd like to try sometime, a lot more spot and stock, a little bit different than, I'm sure you've done that on some other, non-South Florida WMAs, but it's just interesting how it's like a totally different environment down there.
Yeah, it's not my preference to hunt like that, because it's not how I grew up hunting.
Yeah.
But I have killed a few deer, on the ground with my bow and stuff like that. But it's kind of been like an opportunity thing. It wasn't that I decided I was going to go out that day. Let me go try to, spot and stalk some deer with my bow. It just, happened to end up that way.
So obviously there's a limit of $5 in a year in Florida now for yourself, but notwithstanding that, would you say like the last 10 years you would be killing somewhere between like $4 and $10 a year in Florida on public land?
Yeah. Before the restriction, I had 1 year. I think my best year I killed 13.
Wow.
Which was, my standards have changed a little bit since then. There was a lot of younger bucks mixed in with that. And I think I killed 1 or 2 does as well that year. But, everybody I know eats venison, so everyone's like, kill as many as you can, man. 'Cause I don't get to go and I'll eat the heck out of it. So, I donate a lot of meat to people that I kill whatever. And they're like, hey man, you got any meat? And I give them whatever, I don't really care. So, but we eat venison probably 3 or 4 times a week as well. So we roll through them, but, that was my best year. I think it was 13. It might've been 14, which at that point doesn't really matter one way or the other. But, on average, I'd say probably, 4 to 6 a year. That would probably be an average, but the last several years, I think the least amount I've killed is 4. And the 2 years we've been under the new restriction, I think this will be the 3rd year, right?
I think so.
I believe.
That's definitely 2. Yeah, this will be the 3rd year. Yep.
Yeah. So the first 2 years I've killed $4 each year under the new restrictions, which has made me a little more, picky as well.
Yeah.
So since there is a number on it, you know what I mean?
Do you feel like that's like limiting your hunting? Like, do you feel like you're hunting less because of the restriction, because you're being more selective of where to hunt as well? Or are you just not shooting as often?
I think it's a little bit of both. I do think I'm hunting less, but that's also a product of me kind of reevaluating what I do, So I kind of figured out that, if I'm going to kill 5 deer, I'm going to try to kill the 5 best deer that I can kill. If I don't reach 5, then, it is what it is. But I kind of decided I wasn't going to shoot does anymore. If it's a year that I have 0 hunts, period, which I haven't had a year where I've not had a quota hunt, some way, shape or form. But, if I don't have any hunts, period, maybe I'll hunt some of the non-quota places and kill a doe or 2 or whatever. But, my wife's usually good for a doe anyway. She always likes to start the season out with whatever she can kill, whatever's legal steps in front of her is in trouble. So she usually pops a doe or whatever in the beginning. So we've always got meat, but, it's definitely a little bit of both. I wouldn't say I've limited my hunting, but I don't sit in a stand near as much, but that's just a product of, me changing my tactics a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's enough about what you kill or how much you kill. Let's get into really the meat of stuff of how you do it. And I have some ideas, and sometimes as an interview, it's hard not to like suggest things. So I'm just going to try to like keep my mouth shut and listen. So while the average guy or girl in Florida is like pulling a couple quota hunts and hunting, as much as they can the whole season, the statistics, like most people are not even shooting a single deer on public land. So what do you think the biggest factor is in you being able to be successful, multiple times every year versus the average hunter?
I think the biggest factor in me just killing deer, period, is just boots on the ground, just getting out there and walking. I'm even getting to a point to where it's I wasn't gonna say it, but I'm just gonna go out and say it. Since I've had kids, I'm not in quite as good a shape. My I used to exercise a lot more, and my time has kind of been taken up by that. So, but I used to get out and walk. I mean, I would track myself at the beginning of the day, and when I was done, it wasn't uncommon for me to walk 8, 10, 12 miles in a day on a scouting trip. And I mean, that's the thing I put the premium on the most, is just getting out there and walking, because you might think that you can find what you're looking for in a couple hour trip, but things change. I mean, things change on a dime, so you want to have all your bases covered. And also, I think studying maps, identifying certain habitat types and terrain changes, actually getting out and walking those areas and see what they look like on the ground. Because, I've gotten to a point now where I can look at a map and pretty much identify, okay, that's an oak hammock, that's a cypress head, this is a transition area, these are pines, what have you, without, I can look at the map for 2 seconds and, figure out, because I've walked most of that stuff, and I've done that identification thing where, hey, this looks interesting on the map, let me go check it out and see what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So I think map study and boots on the ground have probably been the most important factors.
What would you say your hit percentages on when you're doing a map scout, and what kind of software do you use for your map scouting?
Well, in the last several years, I use Onyx a lot, just because I think it's basically just Google Maps. And Onyx is really cool because you can mark things, you can add photos to your pins, save your tracks and whatnot. So it's been pretty helpful. And actually, the really cool thing I like about it is that you can share pins with other people. And me and my wife share the same account, so it's almost kind of been like a safety thing too.
Oh yeah.
Where if he goes out by herself and I'm watching the kids, which has been a thing the last couple of years, and she would have never thought that she would do that, but she goes out by herself now too, because a lot of times we have to switch on and off. So with Onyx, when she pins a spot, it shows up on my phone too. So if something happens or she shoots a deer and needs help, I can, snag somebody to watch the kids for a minute. I can go out and help her. I know exactly where she's at. So Onyx has been great. Before I used Onyx, I used Hunt Stand a little bit. Mm-hmm. I still have, and I still use it to kind of cross-reference. Even though I use Onyx a lot, I will still randomly throughout the day, when I'm bored, I'll pull up like Bing Maps, Yahoo Maps, all kinds of different stuff, just to get different perspectives on the way things look. Because if you don't realize, every different type of mapping you use, everything looks a little bit different, and it's a little bit different detail and whatnot. So that's
one other thing I really do like about Onyx too, is the fact that you can pin stuff on your desktop and it goes straight to the app. So there's no I mean, you can figure out ways to do that on other platforms or use other things and copy GPS points and that kind of stuff. But I really like. And there's a ton of options on the desktop, so it's not just a single pin. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, I've actually recently been doing that. No one tell my boss, but when I'm sitting at work, if I've got nothing going on and I'm sitting at my desk, I've got Onyx pulled up, and I'm, it's a little different looking at it on a desktop versus your phone screen. So it's pretty cool to review things.
What do you do for work? What's your work schedule like?
I am a corrections officer. I work at the Seminole County Jail, and my schedule it's a rotating schedule. It basically goes, we'll just start off like, sometimes I lose track of the days. Today's Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
All right. So this week I'm off Monday and Tuesday, and I'll work Wednesday and Thursday, and then I'm off Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The following week is my long work week. I'll work Monday and Tuesday. I'll be off Wednesday and Thursday, and I work the full weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's kind of similar to like a firefighter schedule kind of deal.
Yeah.
They're one off, or 2 off, 1 on. I'm 2 off, 2 on, and then every other weekend essentially.
And can you like trade shifts or mess with your schedule sometimes? It sounds like a really like good job for being able to get out and hunt in the fall.
I can't trade shifts so much. Before I got promoted, I'm a supervisor now. So before I got promoted, I could trade shifts a lot easier. We have like time trade contracts and whatnot. But I've been there like 10 years. So I've got plenty of time off accrued, and I've got comp time and stuff. So like during hunting season, that's when I use all my time off. I think I've got like a weekend scheduled off every month, September through January, for all my hunts that I plan on going on. So during the summer, I don't take any time off unless it's like, emergency with the kids or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So I got a little off track there with the mapping, but what would you say your hit percentage is? Like when you're going into a new area and you've dropped a bunch of pins, like, is it like, whatever, 50-50 or like 1 out of 10, or, how often do you walk up on a spot you have marked and, or like, this is exactly what I was looking for?
To be honest with you, not that often.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why it's important to actually get out there and look, because I've got a buddy that does the same thing. He probably marks pins on spots before he goes out there more than I do. I'm kind of selective. I'm looking for more specific things, but if you're looking for a percentage, I would say maybe 25% of the time I actually pin a spot on the map and I get to it. But the other thing you got to realize too is it depends on what time of the year. If I pick out a spot on a map, I say, it looks like this would be a good spot. Well, at some point of the season, it may be a good spot. The thing about quota hunts is you have 3 to 5 days typically to hunt an area. So just because a spot might be good in November, when you have your quota in October, it may not be. So it doesn't mean I'm picking out bad spots. It just means that I'm picking out spots that just aren't on at the time. You know what I mean? But it's kind of a numbers game. You pick out as many points of interest as you can. You go hit them, and you hit other things along the way. Because whenever you get out there, when you actually see the place, if you've never been there before, you have your ideas of what the place should look like, and you get there and you're like, well, you know what, this doesn't look anything like I thought it would.
Yeah.
But it's not a very high percentage. It's just, that's why I said before, it's important to get out there and walk as much as you can.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. In my experience, especially in Florida, I would find that probably half of the spots that I would mark, I couldn't even get to them. It might be a great spot if you could get there. But if you got to walk a mile through vines or, palmettos that you can't see through, there might be a lot of other spots that are more accessible, even if they're further.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that myself. In fact, I make a mistake oftentimes of trying to find the most inaccessible stuff.
Yeah.
And, I look at it like, I should be able to make it. And most of the time I end up getting not turned around, less than lost, but I'll get out there and I'll get a few hundred yards into it. And I'm like, you know what, this is, even if I could get there, it may not even be worth it. So, sometimes your time is better served hunting places or looking at places that are easier to get to. Sometimes people overlook those places. Everybody and their brother wants to go super deep, which I'm a huge proponent of. But now that everyone seems to have e-bikes and whatnot, going deep doesn't mean the same as it did before.
What is your, something I feel like I've been trying to learn is with the like getting through like super thick areas, and Florida is like an extreme example of this, but I think there are thickets and that kind of stuff all through the South that are like this. But I think sometimes like you get to such thick areas, well, the deer are also wanting to like move around and eat and like travel as well. So what's your feeling on that like super crazy thick stuff? Do you think there's a lot of deer in there, or they're just on the edge, or?
Well, generally the super crazy thick stuff, unless there's some sort of food source within it, which I've found oftentimes there is less food inside those kind of areas. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they're using them for security cover or bedding or whatnot. I don't often hunt in super duper thick stuff. I really don't. But I like to find super thick stuff in areas that's immediately adjacent to feeding areas, and maybe hunt the edges of them, things like that. But as far as, if you're looking on a map and you say this area looks like something that no one's going to want to mess with, my experience is a lot of times, if it looks like you really don't want to walk through it, a lot of times the deer don't really want to walk through it either. I mean, obviously there's exceptions to that, but they like the path of least resistance, just like we do. So I try not to go barreling through stuff like that unless there looks like there's something on the other side.
Yeah.
Or I'll walk circles around, not circles, but walk the perimeter of areas like that, looking for trails leading in and out. But
right.
But I try not to.
I think probably a good thing is if there's like a single obstacle. I think like a lot of times a human won't go past it, and a deer might not really, think twice about. Let's say it's like a creek you got to swim across, or like a thicket you got to crawl 10 feet through, but not 200 yards through. I feel like that's like a good barrier that a deer could use for bedding and that kind of stuff. But a deer is not going to use all of their energy, crawling for an evening while we're trying to find something to eat.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there's plenty of times I've walked up to while scouting. I'm like, well, this looks like it's probably got 1,000 gators in it, and I'm tired, and I don't feel like, you know what I mean. But I've had those times too. So, and just 50 to 100 yards on the other side of that creek or canal could be, a hot spot. But
yeah,
sometimes you're feeling adventurous, sometimes you're not. But yeah, you're right. Just one little single obstacle like that is usually nothing for a deer. I mean, I've seen deer swim across lakes.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to come at you with two different scenarios. One, if you're going into like a brand new area, and you find out the beginning of the summer when the first quota draws come out, you know where you're going to be. You have a good hunt coming in the fall, but you've never set foot there. And then once we go through that, I'd like to hear how you approach an area you're more familiar with. But let's start with you draw a new area. Yeah, there's supposed to be good deer in that area. Where are you going to start? Are you going to show up on the property first, or are you going to get on a map first? Just walk me through that.
Okay, so that's perfect too, because I have that same scenario this year actually.
Cool.
So yeah, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the place up on a map. There's a lot of things that go into it. Not that don't even actually involve hunting, but a lot of times these places aren't close to the house. So looking at and seeing where it's at on the map, what towns it's close to, all of those little things to, try to figure out where I can actually stay when I'm going to do the hunt. Which I bought a camper now, so that's been
cool.
Really great for campgrounds and things. But yeah, I do my map scouting. I try to mark, points of interest. I'll do that. I'll look at it a couple of different times, maybe even more than that, just depending on when I feel I can get out there. And if it's a new area I've never been to, when I go out there, it often depends on when the hunt falls. If it's a hunt that's later, say it's like a zone D or zone B hunt, it's going to be December or January or maybe even into February. I'm not even going to bother going and looking at the place during the summertime.
Okay.
There's really no point. But if it's a hunt like this hunt that I have this year, place I've never been to, it's in September. So I've got no choice but to go out and at least lay eyes on the place during the summertime. I hate summertime scouting, but if it's a place I've never set foot on, literally I'm just going out there and I'm walking around looking at different pens that I've marked, looking for old buck sign, trying to get a feel for how the deer are utilizing the different habitat types during different times of the year. Obviously during the summertime, deer are on that summer pattern. If there's any open, old grown up fields or anything like that, I mean, essentially they're going where the best browse is at the time. There's nothing really concentrating them. So, if I want to get a an idea of what kind of deer run around in the area, I'll bring some cameras with me, but I'm pretty terrible at getting deer on camera in the summertime because they're so random. I've got buddies who are like, they can throw up cameras anywhere and they'll get all these velvet bucks on camera. I have no clue what they're doing. I think they're just getting lucky. But I mean, if you're on public land, you can't put any kind of feed out or anything like that. I walk these areas during the summer and I can't even find trails. Like you can find pig trails and things like that, but the deer just seem so random. So that's kind of why I hate hunting or scouting during the summer. But I'm just trying to figure out how they utilize the different habitat types during the fall, during the hunting season. And, looking for licking branches, old rubs. Maybe you can see an old trail that hasn't been used in several months, but you can still see, because it was so used or beat down, it's still kind of defined in the grass, things like that. But more than anything, I'm really just trying to prepare myself with that trip as to what I'm getting myself into later, just to see what kind of habitat types there are, ideas for places to look whenever I come back for food sources when it gets closer to the season, things like that. So I might make one or two trips out to a place and cover it during the summertime, and then I probably won't go back until a few weeks before the actual hunt. But if it's a place later in the season, like I was saying, like if I have a hunt in December, I'll probably start hitting it in like October because the deer are starting to settle into that kind of pattern a little more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll make more frequent trips earlier since they're out of that summer pattern. They're hardhorn. They're potentially laying down sign and things like that. But
yeah, I'm sure some of that depends on where when the rut is in that particular area.
It does. It really does. Deer in Florida are crazy. As you know, like they're rutting right now in South Florida, and then they won't rut and some of the other zones until January and February. So
yeah. What do you typically look for as far as access goes? And also, do you typically try to drive a lot of an area before you start getting out of the truck, or do you just start hitting points to get started?
It depends. A lot of areas don't have vehicle access during scouting times.
Yeah.
So you find yourself, walking or riding your bike in, which just last year was our first year with e-bikes, which was great. So that kind of helps out a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, I've got a bad knee. So after long walking scouting trips, my left knee is typically swollen like crazy. So the e-bikes have helped a lot. But I probably just, like I said, whenever I get on a map and I pick out points of interest, I start hitting those kind of things first.
Yeah.
And if I'm not really liking what I'm seeing with that, then at that point I'm just kind of looking at the map and saying, okay, well, this looks interesting. Let's go. And not trying to really waste any time. I mean, I'm going to figure out what the place looks like as I'm walking and riding it on my bike. So, mm-hmm. I mean, if I can't get away from my kids or something like that, I can't, not that I want to get away from my kids, but if I can't get free time to go check the place out, I'll load the family up. And if it does have vehicle access, we'll go for a ride, see if we can't see any deer in the evening, stuff like that. But, usually I've got points of interest in mind that I'm heading to whenever I go somewhere, whether it's my first time or not.
So, with Florida being so flat for the most part, I know a ton of terrain changes are related basically to water. What type of water features are you looking for, and how deer relate to that?
To be honest with you, there's so much water in a lot of these areas that I hunt. I don't really look for water features so much as I know that lower areas that are probably apt to have more water have different type of habitat, different type of trees and food sources and whatnot. So I don't think I really focus on, the water aspect too much. The only thing I kind of look at with water is water levels, because that will affect, especially early season, the water tends to be higher. Mm-hmm. If I've got an area that's on the edge of a creek swamp that I know early in the season we'll drop water oak acorns or something like that, but that little basin that usually drops the acorns is under 3 foot of water. I'm not going to go mess with it, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's the only thing I really focus on with water, is trying to check out and see what the water levels are. Cause it does, I mean, deer don't mind water, but it does affect deer movement to a certain degree in my experience.
So you're not necessarily like finding a creek that runs through a property and just like starting to head up that creek drainage or head straight to the edge of a swamp. It's kind of broader than that. You know, you're just looking for, so what on a map are you looking for?
I am looking for, first and foremost, I'm looking for potential feeding areas for the time of year that I'm going to be in that particular WMA.
Okay.
Early season, in my experience, deer tend to be more, what I call on the hill, because most of the food is up on higher ground at that time of the year, generally. Obviously, it depends on the specific piece of property you're on. Some pieces of property are just straight up swamp.
Yeah.
And you're not really going to find too much high ground. High ground is, the hill is relative to what piece of property you're on. So if I'm hunting a place that's really diverse, that has sandhill habitat, creek bottoms, bayhead swamps, it's got all these different kind of things. Early season, I'm focusing on looking at, transitions to some of those high areas like the sandhill areas and whatnot, because generally you'll have scrub oak acorns and things, and scrub oak acorns, persimmons, palmetto berries, things like that are going to be more prevalent. Plus you're still going to have some of that good summertime browse available. Later in the season, I change what I'm looking for based on how the food changes, essentially. So
yeah, do you have like a money food source like you're looking for the most? Like, let's say early season. So there may be still some persimmons available, and maybe there's palmetto berries available, and there might be some oaks dropping. Is there like one of those things that you're really going to key on the most if you had the choice?
It's hard to say, because I feel like it changes. Well, it's hard to say because it depends on what piece of property I'm on, because there's, if I'm hunting a certain WMA that doesn't really have any scrub, I've got to look for something a little different. If I'm hunting a WMA that has scrubby type areas, you've got oaks, you've got runner oaks that are kind of, they're I don't know, they're about knee high or so. They don't really get above that. If you've ever walked through like a higher palmetto flat that's kind of patchy, and you've got these little bushy looking oaks, and they're ankle high, knee high, and they've got acorns on them. And when I first found them, I'm looking at them, I'm like, why the heck do these little oak trees have acorns on them already? They're so small. But upon doing a little research, I found out that's about as big as they get. Those things are mature. So if you walk through an area, find those, and every acorn cap is still attached, is broken and bit in half, and then there's no acorn there, you might want to pay a little more attention, because early season, they're literally looking for, when other oak species and things like that are dropping, they may not favor those, but at that time of the year, that's the first thing that's available. And after browsing on weeds and grass and whatever else they're eating during the summer, some hard mast is like, they flock to it. So it's really just what's available first.
It's really interesting. I talked to James Stovall the last episode. We talked a few weeks ago, and he actually mentioned those same oak, short oak bushes, basically. As something that he was keying in on. I really wish I could have heard what you just said about the scrubby areas. I wish I could like go back and hear that like 5 years ago, because I think I would always really key on swamp edges and that kind of stuff, and think like this sandy area is not going to really have much. It's too dry, and but I can think of some specific areas I've even hunted in the past. Actually, an area that's like really like that I'm not going to be blowing any of these spots, because there's just not much deer density there. But I think of like that Chassahowitzka area that's like very sandy and scrubby, and
Uh-huh.
But let's say I go in there. In the past, I probably would have been like, okay, well, ignore all this high sandy area, and I'm gonna like try to find the swamp edge.
Right.
So it's really interesting to hear you say that.
Well, that's kind of like, I feel like that's like everybody's fallback. You find a transition area or a swamp edge where it meets a different habitat type or whatever, and those are all high percentage areas. You know what I mean? But and even if I'm hunting that kind of food source, oftentimes it depends on what the scrubby area looks like. A lot of times that stuff's at night, so it may be tore up. I mean, I've gone into these scrub patches where it's just tracks on top of tracks on top of tracks. And if you put a camera in there, all the pictures you get are at night, or the daytime pictures you get are spikes and does, and the big bucks are in the middle of the night. So, it's not an exact science, but those are the food sources they key on. So if you find them, they're coming from somewhere, obviously. So at least you have a starting point where you can kind of backtrack and trace where they're trying to come from and get a little closer to them in the daylight. But,
so that actually leads into what my next question was, because I was wondering how much do you focus on bedding when you're doing your scouting? Are you trying to figure out where they're coming from, or is it more of a random thing for you?
If I can identify it, I will focus on it. But one thing I found in Florida is the deer pretty much bed wherever the heck they want at times. It's kind of crazy. You would look at an area and say, I bet you there's deer laying up in there. And you go walk through it and you won't jump a single deer, see a single deer track. Then you'll find fresh deer beds, underneath a myrtle tree out in the middle of a pasture.
Yeah.
So if I can identify a bedding area, great. If not, it's kind of a crapshoot, and which makes it a little more difficult too, because if you're trying to play the wind, which I try my best to, which is, as you know, on a short hunt, sometimes you just have to go hunt a spot and hope for the best, even with bad wind. But sometimes you don't really know how to set up on a place because, well, I don't know, the deer are coming here, but I don't know which way they're going to come from, because on this day they showed up from the east, on the next day they showed up from the west, and it's kind of, it's I would say it's a lot more easy to identify bedding areas in certain places. Some places everything looks the same, and deer are just randomly finding something a little different to some sort of little security cover. I found like little myrtle bushes, for instance. I don't know how many deer beds I've found tucked underneath a myrtle bush. And on the same token, I've shot many deer that maybe the hit wasn't the perfect heart double lung shot that you always try to get. It's like a liver shot. So they go off and they run off. They die pretty quickly, but they're not running dead. You know what I mean? So they'll walk for a minute and find a good place to lay down. I don't know how many deer I've found just where they tuck up underneath a little myrtle bush. There might not be myrtles anywhere else. It's like they love, because I don't know, the way those trees set up, they'll tuck them underneath them like a rabbit hole, and you'll see a foot sticking out. You know what I mean? So I feel like they lay in some pretty inconspicuous places when everything's thick everywhere. They look for something a little different.
Yeah.
I know they love to lay in the middle of water too if you've got high spots out in the middle of the swamp. But
I can't tell you how many times I've found a high spot in water and thought, oh, there's got to be a deer bed here though, and it's not. It's not that no deer is ever there, but it's just not worn out that they're like the same deer is going to bed in that same spot, every night. It's just, if they're around, then maybe one will be there. But
and that's the thing too. I think in other states where the habitat and terrain lays out a little differently, I think bedding areas are probably a little more easy to define. I have found beds on those high spots in the swamp where you can tell a deer's using it repeatedly, because there's hair that's just the ground on top of it's barren. There's hair beat into the ground, and there's tracks all around the side of it and stuff like that. I've found that, but it's not. I feel like once you find something like that, obviously you've probably blown that out anyways, because you're there when the deer was probably laying there, and the deer got out of there without you knowing. And you know what I mean? So like I said, it's kind of a crapshoot. I mean, I hunt a place that you're hunting the edge of the water a lot of times, and it's just this big giant sawgrass marsh, and it gets waist deep out there. And right before dark, you'll hear deer sloshing around hundreds of yards out there, and it's waist deep. I'm like, what in the world are those deer laying on? Because it's literally just just sawgrass out there. So it's like, are the deer laying in water during the day, and they dry out at night when they come up? It's
that sounds
crazy.
like a really fun place to hunt, actually, to be, you hear them start moving. That's a fun thing about hunting near water is if you can hear them moving around first. That is fun.
Oh yeah.
So let's go back to this spot. So you kind of got the lay of the land, and just kind of like in advance. So you kind of have an idea, some places you want to check out. So you're gonna go scout this place. Typically, what, a couple? It sounded like maybe even a couple months before your hunt, or 6 weeks. When do you want to really start your serious scouting, like ahead of a hunt?
I always if it's a place I really have no experience in. I mean, even if I do have experience, and I'd say at least a month ahead of time.
Okay.
And I like to I use cameras a lot. I used them sparingly up until the last several years. And I have like 22 cameras or something like that. Now I've accumulated, which sounds like a lot, but I know guys that run 30 or 40.
Okay.
Like I actually randomly talked to James, and I listened to your podcast with him a few weeks ago or whatnot, but I know that he runs even more than that. He runs, it's not exact, but I think he told me he had, at one time, it was 30 something cameras, and he probably has more by now, but there were some areas that I started to hunt that I realized, I've got guys that are running so many cameras out here, and I'm having trouble because the deer in some of these areas seem like they move around so much, like their home ranges are so big. Mm-hmm. So these guys are literally having to run so many cameras to keep on top of the movement, because what may be good for 3 or 4 days suddenly dries up, and now they're a mile away in another area using this other food source for 3 or 4 more days. They're like super nomadic, crazy. So that's kind of driven me to get more cameras. But
are you running cell cams too?
I do have a few cell cams. I have 5 cell cams currently.
Okay.
Those are great because obviously you can set them out and know what's there, and you don't have to go back and put more scent in an area if it's good.
The one thing the cameras are good for too is just knowing where you want to spend your time. A lot of times these, like, there'll be multiple quota hunts open, or just even like a general area open, and you're basically looking for which area is getting the best activity or the best buck.
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of said in the beginning, I've gotten a lot more selective on what I want to try to shoot and try to hunt. So cameras are a huge help with that. If I've got 3 different areas to choose from for opening weekend, 2 of the areas I've got little 80-inch bucks running around, and the third area I've got 2 that are over 100 inches. I'm probably going to go hunt that area because, again, I'm looking for quality versus quantity now. Mm-hmm. And the 3 areas may look exactly the same as far as sign goes. That's the thing, is you don't know. So cameras are a great tool, but cameras don't tell the whole story either.
Yeah.
I found that out the hard way. I can't tell you how many times I've got a camera or 2 in an area, and I'm only getting deer on camera once every few days, and I actually go sit the spot, and it looks like a deer zoo, and they're walking all around the camera, just not in front of them.
Yeah.
So
you show up to an area a month before the hunt. You got your 5 trail cameras with you. What are you looking for to set those cameras up on before the hunt?
I really like putting cameras on scrapes, if they're available. Mm-hmm. I don't often sit over top of scrapes, but I'll sit around active scrapes. Active trails, I think, and if I find a lone food source that's kind of stands out from everything else, those are probably the 3 things I put cameras on the most: active scrapes, active trails, and like a random oak tree that's dropping heavy or something like that.
Will you set a camera up like right where you possibly will hunt? Like maybe not on the same tree, but like in the same spot?
Yeah. I mean, it just depends on how many cameras I have. Things get heavy, but
Yeah.
sometimes I'll carry, if it's an area I know I can't get to very often, it's a little further from home, I'll carry, 10, 12 cameras with me
Yeah.
in my bag. And I'll try to put out as many as I can, because time is limited sometimes. If it's somewhere that's a little closer, I might not bring as many because I know, hey, next Tuesday I'll be back out here again to go look at some more stuff. So I won't try to kill myself as much. But I think about a month ahead of time, and I don't usually want to get out any earlier than that to an area, just for the simple fact that I don't want to get too keyed in on what they're doing too early, because it seems like, I can't tell you how many times I show up to a hunt with an idea of how things are going to go down, and then I have to call an audible mid-hunt, and I end up successful, but it wasn't where I thought it was going to be.
Right. You don't know where everybody else is going to be, or maybe just sit it and the food source dried up or something.
Yeah, it's kind of, you hate to find an area where, oh my God, I've got 5 rack bucks coming through here in the daylight, but the hunt's 3 weeks away, because I guarantee you 90 some odd % of the time it's going to be different when the hunt starts.
Yeah.
So I would rather have, so-so stuff found, and then, the week of the hunt or a few days before the hunt, I really start getting dialed in, because at that point, you're looking at a little better possibility of being successful with what you initially found with your scouting, instead of having to change things up mid-hunt, which always make things difficult.
Is there a point where you will stay, like, basically you quit scouting an area that you're planning on hunting? I guess obviously if you have a camera in a spot and that there's deer, then there's no reason to keep going in there. But are you scouting the day or two before the hunt as well, if you have time?
I try not to. Ultimately, I think it just depends on what I have found.
Yeah.
If I'm still not sold on what I found, I'll go in there a couple days. But I don't like some of the WMAs. They open up vehicular access the day before the hunt, and they call it a scout day.
Yeah.
I hate that. It drives me nuts. But it is what it is. I try not to even be in the place on a day like that, because everybody else is bumping the deer all over the place. No sense in me in doing the same thing. But on the other hand, some people, if it's a place that's got a lot of permits, you may show up the first morning to hunt, and there may be 2 or 3 tree stands in your area, and now you're kind of like,
yeah,
well, crap, what do I do now? Maybe I should have been here yesterday to set my stuff up. I hate doing that. I hate any additional chance close to the hunt to go in and bump the deer is a bad thing. But that's kind of the nature of hunting public land, I guess, especially some of these areas that have those vehicle rules. But that's where an e-bike has really come in clutch, because certain places, they don't allow vehicular access, so you can cover your ground. So if the hunt starts on Saturday, they have a scout day on Friday, and I don't need to show up on Friday, I'm in there with my bike or whatever Monday or Tuesday, doing my final things. Obviously, I'm not allowed to put a tree stand in or anything like that, but oftentimes I just carry them in on my back anyways.
Yeah.
Depending on what kind of setup I have.
What about during the hunt? Do you typically scout midday during a hunt, or are you just kind of either staying in the stand or taking a break? What's that look like?
If I'm scouting midday during a hunt, that means that the stuff that I found is dried up. So yes, I have, and I will. But that's not an ideal scenario, and I've had to do it, and it's worked out. Other ways that I might be scouting during a hunt, though, is if I've got a bunch of cameras out, I like to leave them up through the hunt. So if I'm kind of curious about what's going on in another spot midday, maybe I'll get down and I'll walk over and I'll check a camera, or a couple cameras or whatever, during the middle of the day, and that might help me decide to readjust. But that's also worked not so much in my favor before too, where you're like, I didn't see anything in this primary spot that I wanted to sit this morning. I go check this other camera. One of the bucks I'm after came through there this morning. So now I'm going to switch over there, and of course you switch, and then the spot you were in initially, one of your target bucks walks through it the very first time you're not sitting there. So I do scout midday on some of my hunts, but that's only out of necessity. If I feel like I'm not, if I feel like I'm in a great spot, and I've got some decent deer coming through every couple of days, it's sometimes just a matter of sitting it out and waiting for them, which is hard for me to do. You just ask my wife. My primary style throughout the years has been, I mean, my philosophy is this: the first time you sit a spot is your best opportunity.
Yeah.
You've got the least amount of scent in there and things like that. So I know throughout the years, instead of maybe scouting, I'll have several different areas located before the hunt, and I'll kind of bounce around. And it's like playing ping pong. You're bouncing from spot to spot, and then finally you hit the right spot at the right time, and shoot one. And that's happened a lot for me. But that's really scouting an area really well and having several different areas in mind that you have confidence in. I did last year, actually, I did have a scenario where an archery hunt, when I killed the first 8-point I killed last year, I had these deer pinned down for like 3 weeks before the season. And I was so scared it was going to change. I knew it was going to change, but they kept hanging around. What it was is they were, before the hunt, this was in September, they were working a couple different scrape lines, and it was crazy. All throughout the day, I was getting bucks on camera, like every day. And, it's like 85, 90 degrees. They're chasing does past my camera. They're working scrapes in the daylight. It was just nuts. And I was just like, man, if they could just keep this up, I've got my pick. Because every day I'm having 2 or 3 different shooters walking fast in front of this one camera at least. It was a cell camera. Sure enough, the hunt comes and the food source changes. And the few does that were in that area disappeared. And well, obviously that's what they're after. So they left. So after the first day of the hunt, or after the first morning of the hunt, I said, you know what? I know an area that water oaks started dropping specifically. I know an area where they should be dropping. I'm literally going to I threw a lock on my back because to have that ability to climb whatever tree I needed to. So I threw a lock on my back. And my dad was with me, actually. It's kind of a crazy story. Actually, it's one of the craziest. I just thought about this. This is probably the craziest hunting story I've got. But I told him, I said, hey, we're going to park the truck here. We're going to walk. And we're literally going to walk until, we find what I think the deer are going to be on. It's literally, there's not very many acorns dropping, but I know some of the water oaks have dropped, and my deer have disappeared, all of them. So we walked like a mile and a half deep into this big block, and finally I found an area that it was all really thick cabbage hammock. And those areas are hard to pin down where the deer movement is anyways, because everything looks the same.
Yeah.
But I found an open area that was probably about 100 yards wide. And by open, I mean just more open than everything else around it, where you could see a little bit, especially once you got up in a tree. And I could hear some acorns dropping on the edge of it, hitting the top of the cabbage palms. Mm-hmm. Every 5 seconds, you heard an acorn drop. It's hard to see tracks. I did find a couple brand new fresh rubs, little small rubs, and one scrape. So, well, this looks as good as any place. It's only about a mile or so from where I was getting those deer on camera. So I'm sure some of the same deer are using this area as well. A mile is nothing, through the middle of the woods. So he picked one side, I picked the other. Saw an area, it looked like there was a little funnel coming out of the thick cabbage palms out to the open area where the acorns were dropping. And I jacked up with my lock on. Ended up within about 30 minutes of sitting, I had a 6-point follow a doe past me. Not a deer I recognized, completely different deer than what I had on camera. He was small, probably, 70s or whatever. Let him go. He was probably about 40 yards anyways, kind of a long shot. And
literally, we had maybe 10 minutes of shooting light left. My dad had already seen a couple deer that he couldn't identify feeding on the edge of thick cabbage palms. And I said, well, we're so deep in here. I used Onyx to track me, obviously, of course. But I said, we're so deep in here. We've got a long walk out. Let's get down a few minutes early. And he says, yeah, sounds good to me. Let's get out of here. So he's already down to the bottom of his tree at this point. I, being in the lock-on, having the climbing sticks and whatnot, am taking a little longer. I've lowered my bow to the ground, and I've gotten to the point to where I've climbed down onto the first climbing stick from my stand, and I'm starting to unravel my strap where I can undo the ratchet strap. And I hear something back behind me down that little funnel. And I was making a little bit of noise, so I couldn't tell what I heard, but I turned and I looked, and I see a sweet gum limb. And I'm like, it looks like it's shaking a little bit. And then next thing you know, it starts thrashing up and down. I'm like, holy crap, it's probably a bear, It was dark enough to where at that, I think it was like 40 or 50 yards from me. It was dark enough to where I couldn't really make out was there until I hopped back up on my platform to get a better look, and I could see his antlers up in the limb. So I'm freaking out at this point. My bow's on the ground. I don't have my release on. Nothing. He was done with that limb, and he was coming my way, just as quick as I got up in that platform. So now I'm scrambling to pull my bow back up and get my bow up. By the time I get my bow up and the string off of I had tied it to my bottom cam. By the time I get it off my bottom cam, he's almost directly underneath me. I still don't have an arrow nocked. I still don't have my release on. My release is Velcro, so it's going to make all kinds of crazy noise. It's attached to my bowstring right now, like Velcroed around the string and the cables. And I said, well, it's the only chance I got. So it's, pulling open. The deer doesn't even look at it. I'm like, this is crazy. So I was fumbling so bad and I was shaking so much, I couldn't even get my release Velcroed to my wrist. At that point, I literally said, screw it. I'm just going to grip it.
Yeah.
I knocked an arrow, and he gets out about 15 yards, hard quartering away. Mind you, my dad's like 75 yards away on the ground, fooling around with his tree stand, with his headlamp on. But the cabbage palms are tall enough in between that the deer doesn't see it. So he stops out at 15 yards. I draw back, and I hit him perfect. For the angle, it was like right in front of the back cam and lodged in the opposite shoulder. He runs off out about 100 yards and falls over. I can see I don't realize that he's either fallen over or if he just laid down, I can see my lighted knock because it was still hanging out of the back of him through the woods a ways. As the deer runs off, I hear my dad yell, "What was that?" He says he sees this glowing thing, because the deer literally ran 20 yards from my dad as he's on the ground putting his stand together. But that was probably the craziest thing I've ever had happen to me, having to climb back up in the tree and do all that. It actually worked out. But long story short, that was an example of, I wasn't feeling what I had going on. The deer had left me. Food choices changed. I was able to literally just wandered through this block until I found, sign and acorns dropping, and it worked out. Doesn't always work that way, but. Was
that one of the deer you had on camera or a totally different one?
That was not a deer I had on camera either. No, not that I'm aware. I don't believe so. He had a rack that was really similar to some of the deer I had on camera, but I don't believe he was. No, and he when I first shot him, I thought he was giant. You look at pictures of him, I took he looks giant, but he ended up scoring like, it was a good deer. He ended up scoring like I think it was 98 and change or 99 and change, something like that.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, I just shot a registry buck with my bow. No, I was about an inch off.
So. Yeah, I mean, that's still, I just for perspective, I mean, that, a 6-year-old mature good buck in Florida could be, may never get over 100 inches. So.
Right. Yeah, that specific area I hunt, that's a local WMA, and 100-inch deer in there is pretty rare. Maybe once every 2 or 3 years does one pop up.
Yeah. No, that was a cool story. Okay. So, I think we covered pretty well, like a brand new area. What's your typical preseason in an area that you're familiar with? How do you approach that?
Well, it's, about the same as far as, scouting time prior to the hunt. At least typically about a month.
a month out. But obviously, if it's an area I've got experience with, I've got places that maybe I've either hunted before or had success in before, and I always like to mark those off the list. Hunting history can get you in trouble, but if you have enough places and you check enough of them prior to your hunt, you know, something's gonna at least have the potential to work out. But I like to check all my history first, and I'm always, it's hard with an area that you've got a lot of experience in, like the WMA last year where I killed that buck during archery. Mm-hmm. I'd been hunting, that's the WMA I killed my very first deer in. So I've got endless amounts of experience in it, and it can work against you because sometimes you get so caught up with your history that it makes it hard for you to branch out and look at new stuff. But I try my best to, you know, if the history isn't working out, if things just aren't looking good, you know, it's like, well, instead of settling, I'm going to go look at some different stuff that, you know, I'll literally be like, you know what, I've never hunted off this road. Let me go, you know, look at the map at this, see what looks interesting, go check it out. But it's pretty much the same process as far as the time, you know, food sources. I think, you know, the food sources are the biggest thing that dictate where I'm going to be at. I'm not going to, in December, I'm not going to hunt a scrub patch because by that time, most of that food source is gone. You know, I would say November, December, I'm focusing more on like live oak acorns, things like that. Not scrub, you know, there's sand live oaks, which are in scrubby areas, but the big live oaks, because they tend to drop a little bit later. You know, so obviously scrub oaks early in the season, and to kind of fill in the gaps, you've got laurel oaks and water oaks kind of in between, which really start get going in October or whatnot. So it's really food source driven anywhere I go.
As far as like other deer sign goes, is there anything else that you put a priority on, like tracks or rubs or scrapes?
I put the most priority on large amounts of tracks and big tracks. You know, sometimes you'll find an area that you'll have very few tracks in, but they're all big. You know, that's an exception where I'm definitely going to want to check that out. If I'm only seeing 3 or 4 different sets of tracks, but they all look giant, obviously those are probably bigger deer.
Yeah.
Could be a big footed doe, I don't know, but I'll slap a camera up in an area like that to see what's walking around. But if I can find an area that has it seems like it has a very high concentration of deer, those are usually the best places to start, because if you've got a ton of does, being the time of year it is, there's going to be some bucks around as well. That's kind of a no-brainer. I've killed a lot of deer. I've killed a lot of bucks in places that don't have buck sign, period. Literally just found a couple oak trees dropping that it looked like cows had been underneath, and you know, deer trails that looked like pig trails leading to them. Sit there, never ran a camera, and a nice rack buck shows up. So I think that's probably the most important thing. And I think that's why it's so frustrating for me scouting during summer, because I can walk some of these areas and it doesn't look like a deer lives in them, period. Like the whole property, you'll barely find 4, 5, 6 sets of tracks. And then, you know, the fall comes, or what we perceive as the fall, September, hunting season starts, and all of a sudden there's trails and this and that and the other. It's like a light switch flips. But tracks, I like to find big rubs in an area. But then again, I've watched 2-year-old basket racks rub on trees as big as my calf. So that's not always, it's not a deal breaker, you know, if I'm not finding big rubs. I've also put cameras on trails with pencil rubs, or tiny, and got nothing but mature rack bucks on the cameras too. So, but tracks, buck sign is secondary for sure. But usually the tracks are precluded by a food source. So if I have no buck sign whatsoever, which the place that I'm scouting, this new place that I'm hunting, I've never been to before, between me and a buddy of mine, I don't know, we've covered 20 plus miles in this place so far, and found less than a handful of old rubs. So
I
don't know what they rubbed it on, if they rubbed their antlers at all. And the place is really wet, so scraping is probably not really much of an option. So it's going to be kind of an interesting place, but there's very little buck sign there. I know the bucks are there. We've got some pictures of them, and we've seen them with our own eyes, but they just act different. Seems like they act different everywhere you go. So
it is really interesting
how
property to property, like some places will be, and it's not even necessarily related to the number of deer there, but some places have tons of rubs, and some places there's just not much. And some places they scrape all over the place, and sometimes you only find a couple.
Yeah, it is. It is really interesting, and some places seem to be easier to hunt than others because of the amount of sign that deer lay down. I've got a few places that have really given me trouble, and still to this day give me trouble trying to kill deer in them. And it's those deer lay down all kinds of sign, but they are, like I said before, they are nomadic as heck. I've never seen deer that move around so much. So I've got a few places that's taken me several years. I still haven't killed a deer, and that I won't quit. They frustrate the heck out of me, but I've gotten close. You know what I mean? But it's one thing I put a premium on is figuring out how deer utilize the specific habitat types, because every WMA seems to be a little different in that regard. And in one place for a deer like to walk cypress, the next place they won't touch it, as an example.
I had a couple places like that, and I did quit. I moved to Georgia. I gave up on them. But, okay, so you've answered a lot of my questions, just kind of going through this, but I'd have a couple more. One thing with you hunting like primary food sources, like obviously hogs are going to be an issue. How do you, what's your attitude towards hogs? Do they matter at all to you? Will you not hunt an area, or is it a good thing?
I hunt some WMAs that have very few hogs. I hunt some that are loaded with them. If you have pigs in an area, they're going to be around the same food sources the deer are feeding on, the same food sources that the bears are keying on. It's just, I prefer if they're not in an area, because they do affect the deer movement to some degree. I've had them spook deer off before. I don't really target pigs unless somebody says, hey, next time you see a pig, shoot it.
Yeah.
I'd like to do one process or something like that. I'll do that. But I don't mess with them much. And they are kind of a hindrance at times, but sometimes you can't get away from them. Sometimes it's literally, 1 hour, you got a group of pigs in front of you. Next hour, a couple deer come through. 30 minutes later, here comes a bear. So when you're hunting food sources like that, it's not just deer that focus on them, so you're liable to run into anything.
I've heard some people that won't hunt a spot with hog tracks and hog sign, and some people that think you're more likely to find a deer there because they're there because of the food. So I'm always interested in getting different perspectives on that.
Yeah, well, there's an area I know that me and you both hunted that has all kinds of pig sign. So if you're going to go by that logic, you wouldn't be able to hunt it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's hog rooting everywhere, so you just got to roll with what's there.
So let's say your camera, you've got a good spot. You're like an oak tree that's dropping, and you're like, there's a good amount of tracks. It's like got good sign on it. You go in for the first day of a hunt, and like you see nothing at all. Is that something like there's a good chance you're going to come back and sit that a second day, or do you typically move on?
And I've been running a camera in that spot, you said?
Yeah.
It depends. If everything seems to be exactly the same, nothing has changed that I can tell. And it may have just been one of those random days where, things aren't showing up. They didn't pass through that area. I'll probably give it another couple sits. Mm-hmm. If I believe that some other factor has potentially influenced me not seeing anything there that morning, then I'll be more likely to move. Like, we're in that transition where the oaks are starting to drop. I was sitting on a tree that's one of the first, and more have started, and the deer have moved on to other places.
I might go look around midday and change accordingly. Or if I had somebody else in that area that was set up somewhere that was not advantageous for me to see deer, they could have bumped deer that otherwise would have came in that morning, something like that. Yeah, but if everything seems the same, I'll give the spot justice, and I'll sit it a couple times. I think if I haven't seen anything by like a third sit, I'm out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because again, your first time or first few times in an area are going to should be the most productive. I think it's something I've said before to people, whether it be my wife, my dad, or friends or whatever that I'm hunting with. I'm like, this was the perfect morning. Like something should have been here. And if I have that feeling, I'm probably not going to sit it again. I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just get that feeling. You're like, man, why didn't I see a deer this morning? My wind was perfect. There's no one around me. Food source is the same. Something happened. Sometimes you can't always pinpoint it, but if you get that feeling where already you're not confident, your best bet is just to go find something else.
Do you typically, if it's like a local WMA that, let's say you have multiple seasons that you're hunting there, will you sit a spot more than a couple times in a season?
You mean like a non-quota?
Yeah, or let's say you just have an archery and a muzzleloader quota like a couple weeks apart. Like, is there a good chance you're going to sit the same spot if you saw a deer the first time?
Yeah, I mean, well, for instance, last year I had an archery quota so it was the place I killed the 8. I had an archery quota there. My wife got a muzzleloader quota in the redraws. Did my father, and then I got a rifle quota in the redraw. All 4 of the permits we had last year were all on redraws. We had a good year in the redraws. I got the archery quota in the redraw as well. But so the first day of the archery quota, I sat a spot that from the first day of the muzzleloader quota, I had my dad sit it. His bucks were still randomly showing up there. He ended up popping a cap off on a really nice 8-point that first morning of the muzzleloader. And then the first morning of the gun hunt, I sat it again because I had gone in there. I had a camera in there that wasn't really active, but I had gone in there with the purpose of actually pulling the camera. And not far from my camera, I jumped a really big buck, and this was probably about a week before the hunt. And I walked over to where he was at, and there was a beat down trail. Of course, it's these network of trails that are now running behind my camera. So like I said, cameras don't tell everything. So I decided to sit it anyways. And the first morning of that general gun hunt, I ended up shooting a registry 8-point, which I believe is the same buck that I jumped.
Oh yeah.
Prior. So that same spot, played into all 3 hunts. I may not have been successful there during the archery hunt, but there could have been success during the muzzleloader and the gun hunt. It ended up working out. So
were those hunts like 2-3 weeks apart, something like that?
The archery and muzzle were a month apart, and the muzzle and gun were about a month apart as well.
Yeah.
So there was plenty of time for the place to rest and whatnot in between.
Do you, on your hunts, do you typically have like morning spots and evening spots, or do you set up in the evening and leave your stand overnight? What do you do with that typically?
Yeah, if I'm going to hunt the spot the next morning, I'll just leave my stand. I have, I don't know, 4 or 5 different climbers, so and 2 or 3 lock-ons. So if I feel like I want to bounce around a lot, but I don't want to mess with carrying the stands, maybe I'll put different stands up in different places and bounce between them. But I try not to do that too much because it becomes a hassle to get everything out of the woods, at the end of the hunt. But typically, if everything seems like it's going to plan, I put my climber in, where I want to be at. If it doesn't work out, I'll pack it out and move it to a new spot. So usually I'm only hunting with 1 stand for myself, and I'll just move it around accordingly.
All right, so a couple last things, and we'll wrap it up. But for the Florida hunters, if somebody's well, whether they're new or not, Do you have any advice for using the quota system, as far as like how to get the most out of the quota hunts?
I guess my biggest advice as far as quota hunts goes, or getting the most out of the quota system, is it seems really appealing to try to get as many permits as you can and whatnot, but really that can work against you, especially if you have a busy schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice is find an area that's close to home, scout it as much as you can. I mean, every day you're available to go, and focus on that in the beginning. And there's plenty of places that don't require 8, 10, 12 points that are good places to hunt deer. I mean, I got several of them locally. They may not produce the biggest deer in the world or whatever, but some of them do actually. Some of them produce freaking giants, and they only take a point or two to get. So do your research, read the online brochures, front and back. Look at the application schedules on the website, because that's a big thing that I see. People are always they're getting on Facebook and asking, hey, when does this permit application period start? When does this happen? There's first come, first serve for certain types of hunts that are easy to get. I'm not going to name them because I take advantage of that myself. But I'm just well versed in the information. I just read. I read a lot. So I know when certain application periods end. I know when certain ones begin. I figured out permits are easier to get a hold of. So I always have opportunity.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work. You got to sit down and sift through all this different information. But once you get it figured out, you're good to go. But it's like I said, don't overwhelm yourself with trying to get 15,000 permits, because one of the biggest things that I've learned, and I kind of hinted towards it in the beginning, was, I think that people, as they get older or as they get more experience, they evolve and progress as hunters, and what you're looking for out of a hunt changes.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I wanted to kill, in the very beginning, all I wanted to do is kill a deer. Mm-hmm. And then once I killed a deer, I was like, man, I want to kill as many deer as I can. This is great. So I did. I kind of went through that phase where I was like, I killed 14 deer in a year, and I was like, man, I could have shot more, And now I've kind of gotten to a point to where I've realized that I was actually hurting my success by hunting too much and having too many different places to hunt. Because when you're in the stand, what are you not doing? You're not scouting. And ultimately what leads to a successful hunt, minus the blind luck aspect, is scouting.
Right.
which I've taken advantage of. I've gone into places randomly and killed deer. I mean, it happens. But if you want to be successful, more often than not, you have to do the work. And I kind of came to this realization after there's some guys that I know. You said you wanted to interview me because of my success and whatnot. And yeah, I've gotten lucky a lot, and I do work really hard. There are some guys that are straight up animals on some of these WMAs that I know. And, I look at some people and I'm like, this dude's a beast, and I take things from people, that, maybe I haven't realized on my own. And one of the things I noticed was some of these guys hunt like 2 or 3, maybe 4 hunts a year. And they rarely hunt like non-quotas, not like in between. They're literally just scouting. That's all they're doing.
Yeah.
So they might sit 15 times, 16 times in a year, but they killed 2 or 3 bucks over 100 inches. And it's like, man, it's kind of a light switch went off, but it's kind of a hard thing too, because I love being in a stand as much as possible. So, overwhelming yourself with too many hunts can be detrimental to actually having success. But, if you're, it all depends on your schedule too. If you're someone who just wants to be in the woods and you don't have that much free time and you value stand time, then, that's your thing, go for it.
Yeah.
But if you do have the kind of schedule that works out for you to where you can scout and this and that and the other, if you're looking to be more successful, on, you have certain goals that you're working towards, like killing bigger deer or things like that. There's nothing more valuable than scouting as much as possible. Scouting more than sitting in a tree. The last 3 years has produced two registry bucks for my wife and 2 for me as well, I believe, in the last 3 years. So, and that's just, because we're trying to target bigger deer. But
right. Yeah. And that is one good thing too about the way the antler quotas and stuff have worked out. There are getting to be some more maturity. You can shoot less deer, but there are getting to be some more mature deer. So that's a good side effect of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was against it at first because I was like, man, I don't want to be limited on how many deer I can kill. But it's actually, I've kind of put a positive spin on it. Oh, hold on just 1 second. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I think one thing you made a good point about is when is really learning a local area, and I think one mistake I made was really focusing on some local areas that were just like really hard to hunt places. But I think there's some like kind of in between things where you can pick them up on a redraw, or they don't just get pounded, and you learn something like that, and then you treat the rest of the quota hunts almost like an out of state hunt where you just try to draw one a year, and like you said, you have time to like focus on that new area, and the rest of the season you focus on your main area, instead of just trying to like stack up the hunts like you're saying. If you can grab one in a redraw, then great. But you're not necessarily counting on that because you've got a local, area that you really learn well.
Yeah, that's. I love traveling and hunting different places, but they really do, or that really does potentially affect, your ability to have success. Just because places close to the house, you're able to scout more and spend more time in them. So, if like I said, my advice for anybody who's new to the quota system or whatever is read as much as you can on, like I said, all the application schedules, the rules, the quota hunts, the brochures, obviously, because every single one of them is different. They all have different rules, different scout times when vehicles are allowed to be on the property, different bag limits, and find something close to where you live so you can learn it. Once you get something like that in your back pocket where you've got a place like, what, I can roll into this place, check a few spots, and I can go kill a deer, pretty confident, then branching out and learning new things is great. But for someone who's new to it, if you're bouncing all over the state trying to hunt all these different quota hunts that you've gotten in the redraw and whatnot, and you continue to not be successful because you're not able to spend enough time in an area to actually learn it, that gets discouraging for people. And private land is harder and harder to good quality private land is harder and harder to get a hold of nowadays. I've hunted private a little bit, but now I'm literally just I literally just focus on quota hunts and random romp and stop areas. Just I can't stand dealing with the whole political factor of the private and all the money you've got to pay out. I can hunt 6 or 7 different WMAs throughout the year for the money that I would pay to have, 3 designated areas.
Yeah.
Within a lease that I can't move from. You know what I mean? Like that drives me nuts. I've got to be able to bounce around. So.
All right. Well, my last question that has to do with scouting. I meant to ask you this earlier. If you're new to an area, do you prefer to just cover as much of that area as you can quickly, or do you try to like pick a block and pick that apart?
It depends on the size of the area that I'm hunting. If I'm hunting a smaller WMA, I'll try to cover a majority of it. But, if I'm hunting anything that's over, say, 10,000 acres, I will typically, I'll say I'll choose a road. Like say there's a road in this WMA that's the place is 35,000 acres, and this one road covers a stretch of like 7 miles or something, and it's got a very good mix of habitat types.
Mm-hmm.
It's real diverse. I'll focus on just that one road, because what you can do is you can kind of spread yourself a little too thin at times,
mm-hmm.
instead of focusing on an area too much. And I've actually done this in this one WMA that's continuously giving me trouble. I won't name it, but I've hunted it really hard. I say really hard, but I've hunted it whenever I get a quota hunt for over the last 5-6 years. And every year I learn a little bit more, and every year I get a little closer. And we've actually had success there. My wife ended up shooting a small 8-point there a couple of years ago. And she got really close this past year, which I also want to mention too. Like I kind of gauge my success based off of her success as well, because I'm not only, and when my kids get old enough, it'll be the same way. It'll be not all about me. Right now, it's about me and my wife, and then when they get older, it'll be about all of us. But you literally just try to pick out an area and learn as much as you can. And now that area, square mile wise, is probably, it's like a 2x2x2x2 area mile wise. So it's like it's a good chunk, or maybe even a little bigger.
Yeah.
But it's got a lot of different stuff to offer, and there's always deer somewhere within that area, and there's always good deer. This place has good deer all over the place. It's just a matter of trying to figure them out. But they, in a large area, you're better off just kind of limiting what you in the beginning at least, the kind of stuff that you're looking at, because you're turning it into a smaller WMA essentially. What I mean?
Yeah.
It's not as overwhelming at that point. When you look at 35,000 acres on a map, you're like, holy crap, where do I start? It can get really overwhelming. So that would be my advice. Man, I mean, that may work for some people, but kind of isolating things in a bigger area like that works for me at least.
Yeah, well, I think we covered some really good, helpful stuff as far as scouting goes. Just wrapping up, is there anything that we haven't touched on, or any advice for any other hunters out there that we didn't touch on?
I can't really think of anything else at the moment. Just to reiterate on the fact that, especially people who are new to hunting, if you've had no one tell you this before, which I had no one tell me, I figured it out as I went. But again, scouting as much as possible. It's hard when you want to be in a tree, but like I wanted to in the past. But if you can prioritize scouting over the actual stand time, that will really up your odds of success, in my opinion, because I've seen the positive results of that as I've kind of switched my tactics up over the last few years. So if you can focus on that and be that disciplined in the beginning, there's no telling what could happen, because I definitely wasn't. I killed a lot of deer, but it was I had a great time. I go sitting all the time, and you're literally just hitting different spots. I would literally find a spot on a map and say, hey man, this looks good. I'm going to take my climber in there, find a trail or something, set up. Sometimes it'll work out, sometimes it wouldn't. But upping your percentages as far as sit to kill ratio, if you can stay in the woods as much as you can, just walking, scouting, and learning, I think that's second to none.
Yeah. Yeah, that just kind of goes back to life changing your priorities and how you're hunting. Because if you're young and don't have a family and just have lots of time, lots of weekends to throw at hunts, then it's fun to just get out there in the woods. But if you only have 5 weekends a year that you can spend in the tree, then you got to take advantage of your other times, an hour or two here and there to make the most of those weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously case by case basis, but and some people hunt for different reasons too. Some people, it's more of a social event, and they want to get out and especially like dog running and whatnot. That's which I've done a little bit of. It's not my preferred way to hunt, but I've got a lot of friends that do it. It's really fun. It's a big social event. It's just a different style, and every style of hunting is good. But it just depends on what you want to get out of the experience. If you want to try to kill the biggest deer, that you can, you've obviously got to have a different style versus if you want to go out and kill, as many deer as you can.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, ultimately it's what you want to get out of it and what kind of experience you want to have.
Man, this was fun. Thanks for finally, we got our schedules together, and I'm glad we got to talk. And I think this should inspire some people to get out there and scout and give some people some ideas, which is exactly what I was hoping for. So I really appreciate you making some time for me.
Yeah, man, no problem. Sorry it took so long to get together. Things have been
that works both ways.
For me
so yeah, it wasn't just either one of us. We just couldn't get our schedules lined up. So yeah, I'm glad we finally got it to happen. So
yeah, man, no problem.
Good luck this season. I'm sure you'll be getting some good ones. So I hope you get the ones you're after.
I do too, man. I appreciate it, and hope you get into something good up there in Georgia, man. Those deer get a little bigger up there.
Yep. I'm gonna get it figured out. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you've listened this far, make sure you are subscribed so you'll find out when the next episode is released. You probably have as good an idea as I do when I'm gonna put that out. So make sure you're subscribed, and appreciate all the reviews you've been leaving for us and all the downloads. All the support is awesome. We're out down south.